Hey guys, what's up? It's Emily. Welcome to today's video. I'm really excited to talk about today's video. We're going to be talking about all of my character-driven book recommendations. Basically, there are two types of ways a narrative or a fictional book can be driven forward. One is through plot, and the other is through character. As an actor and a filmmaker, I typically find character-driven stories. If I find the character interesting and their story interesting and the themes of that book interesting, there's really nothing like a character-driven book for me or a character-driven movie. I just love stories where you just do a deep dive into the complexities of one character. So just a quick little definition off the internet for you. A character-driven story places the primary focus on the character's internal struggles, motivations, and personal growth, with the plot often being secondary to the development of the characters. The characters' actions and motivations are shaped by their unique personalities, values, and desires. So I'm gonna be sharing with you these books that I've read all of them. I recommend most of them. There are one or two that I'm not crazy about. We have a variety of genres here. We have lit fic, we have fantasy, we have romance. I wanted to make this video for the summertime because personally there's nothing like going to the beach and just like sinking into a wild character. There's nothing like it for me. Here are some character-driven books to read on the beach. Have a little hot girl summer moment. Let's get into it. So the first book, I've talked about this book so much on my channel recently because I read it in my 24-hour reading challenge. I mention it in my May reading wrap-up, and that is The Comeback by Ella Berman. This is, I guess, like contemporary fiction. It's basically about this young actress in her early 20s. She's been living away from Los Angeles and Anaheim for like a year. She just kind of left the scene. I think she like left the Golden Globes and like didn't look back. There's stuff that happened that she kind of has to deal with. And in order to deal with it, she has to go back to LA and her estranged husband and her friends that she left behind and her professional contacts, etc. So it's really about her just coming back to LA. It's very much like of the Me Too movement, etc. And her journey to claiming her life back, I guess. This is like in the top 3 characters that I want to play as an actor. I loved. Her name is Grace Turner. So good. I highly recommend this book, and it's like such a good summer read. Get it. I got it off Book of the Month too. Next is a book that I'm not gonna lie, like I wasn't crazy about, but I know a lot of people like it, and that's Sally Rooney, Conversations with Friends. It's about this girl, Frances, and she has this other friend, Bobby. Bobby is like a little self-possessed, I guess. One night they go to this like poetry reading. She meets this very well-known photographer and her husband. Frances and the husband get intimate in this book. It's Sally Rooney. It's a quick read. It's not even 300 pages. If you want to give the Sally Rooney universe a try, yeah, it really is a deep dive into Frances though and her relationship with all of these people, with her friend Bobby, with the famous photographer, and with this guy Nick, and kind of how they all inform her next steps. That's not my favorite, but it looks cute. So if you're trying to look cute on the beach, I feel like this is definitely an option. Next, I want to get into a fantasy book. Most fantasy books are plot driven. The first few books of the A Court of Thorns and Roses series are no exception to that. They were very plot driven. My favorite book of all time is A Court of Silver Flames. By the way, I'm going in alphabetical order here. Yes, A Court of Silver Flames I consider a character-driven story, and the character is Nesta, and I think that that's why I love Nesta so much, and I think that's why A Court of Silver Flames is my favorite book. Not only because of Nesta's story and her arc and everything, but because it is primarily character-driven and not plot-driven, like the first 3. The Christmas special is its own thing, but the first 3 are definitely plot-driven, and this is more character-driven. You really start with Nesta in one place, and you end in a totally different place. The story moves through as she kind of battles her own thing. There's some small plot. It's mainly focused on Nesta driving through her own issues. I don't want to put this down. I have to reread this. I've only read it once, and it's literally my favorite book, and I need to read it again. Okay, next we have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I wasn't like absolutely obsessed with this book. It was one of those situations where the book was really hyped before I read it, so I had really, really high expectations for it, and they weren't like 100% met, but it was really good. For a character study, it's really interesting because this book is written in interview format, so it's like basically about this band that's, I guess, based loosely off of like Fleetwood Mac. Oh my god, that's gonna drive me crazy. What is that little loop in my hair? can't believe I was talking about Nesta with that in my hair. It focuses on these characters through their interviews throughout the years, which is a really, really fun way to do a character-driven piece. It's driven by all of these band members and who they know. You know, there's some plot, but I would argue that this is character-driven. I would definitely give this a read. It's a quick read because it is written in that kind of like interview format, so you get through it quickly. It was Book of the Year in 2019, Book of the Month. So if you haven't read any Taylor Jenkins Reid yet, we'll definitely get to it more on her later. Next, I have Good Material by Dolly Alderton, which I recently read last month. It was my first Dolly Alderton book I read. It's about this man in his 30s who was recently dumped by his girlfriend of 3 years. And he kind of has to navigate his life post-breakup. It really is just about him reestablishing relationships as a single person and not as a couple, and figuring out what that relationship was and what happened, who he is now without it, and like what it all means, really. And then you get the woman, like the girlfriend, the ex-girlfriend's perspective at the end as well. Kind of like a doubly character-driven piece. Dolly Alderton is just the best. I love her writing so much. I think she's like one of my favorite authors. She's definitely my new favorite author and one of my favorite authors ever now, I would say. I love how she gets in the mind of this man in his 30s. It's like super insecure. What I like about the book too is that I think it takes a situation where like most young women would, in another story written by another person, look down on this man and the way he acts and the circumstances he's under, but I think the way Dolly writes him makes him sympathetic, and I just think she's brilliant. Next, I have Heartbones, which is a Colleen Hoover book that really surprised me when I read it about like 2 years ago now. It's kind of like a wealth gap study. It's about this girl who, it literally opens on the first page, like she's in a trailer and her mom has died of a drug overdose. When her mom dies, she ends up connecting with her dad. Her new stepmom is like really wealthy. So all of a sudden she goes from like this life in poverty with her drug addict mom to like this like mansion beach house, and she meets this guy and yada yada yada. But it really is about her navigating this kind of like new situation that she finds herself in that is like totally in contrast to the rest of her life as she knew it. The next book I have is The Idea of You, which is a new movie with Anne Hathaway and Nick Galanzine. The screenplay is a lot different from the book. The book was written, I believe, in like 2017, and I actually am partial to the screenplay just in terms of like what the screenplay is trying to say. But it's basically about this woman who, I think she's like 39 when the book starts and she turns 40 during the book. She has this daughter who in the book is 12 and in the movie is like 17 or 18, which actually makes a big difference in the character dynamics. This woman ends up meeting the hotshot of this boy band, like equivalent to what Harry Styles was in One Direction. And they end up like dating and like maybe falling in love. The book really focuses more on the struggle of that, and I think the movie focuses more on the celebration of that. I would recommend reading the book and watching the movie. My boyfriend is in the movie for like a hot second. He did work with Anne Hathaway and Nick Galanzine and had a really nice experience. So I would definitely read the book first and watch the movie, and then like it's really fun to compare the two. They're so different, and like you follow her as she kind of navigates this new chapter in her life post-divorce and also this like new relationship. It's really, really beautifully written. Highly recommend it. Next we have another kind of fantasy book which has some plot, but I believe it's mostly character driven, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Just, you know, one of the great books of this kind of time that we're in. This is about this woman, Addie LaRue, in like the late 1600s in France. She makes a deal with the devil and she's like, I want to live forever. And then in exchange, no one remembers her. If you're having a conversation and then you walk away, the person will not remember you when you come back. It obviously creates a lot of problems. Like you can't live anywhere permanently. You can't have a job anywhere. Everyone's gonna forget you. So she's been just like scraping by for the past like few centuries, just kind of like lying to people and like stealing and surviving, because while she can steal and people will forget, she won't have to face the consequences, she also can't like stay anywhere long enough to like make money or, you know, do any of that stuff. And then she meets somebody all of a sudden one day that remembers her when she comes back the next time. So it's kind of a romance, kind of a fantasy. Next we have A Little Life, which is the character-driven book of all time. This is about Jude and his life. It's this friend group, they live in New York, and it kind of chronicles their time from their 20s through, God, like their 50s or something. Definitely check the content warnings before reading this book. This is one of those books you will weep multiple times when you read it. I've never loved a character more than I loved Jude and wanted to reach out and hug someone based on the words I was reading on a page more than this character, and all of the supporting characters as well. It's him living through traumas and his past, and it's a lot. It's a lot, but it is character driven. Next we have Mame by Jessica George. This was a pretty big book last year. Another great beach read. This is just kind of like a coming of age story about this young woman. She's the primary caretaker of her ill father with Parkinson's. Her mom's kind of like out just in another country. It's just about her, like it says, experiencing some important firsts. It's just very smart, it's very funny, very quick. Surprised it's a debut novel because it was just so beautifully written and very kind of easy to get through. A great beach read. I literally read this on the beach. So next we have the Magnolia Park series. This is a series of 5 books. The most recent just came out in February. Basically about this extremely privileged, wealthy group of youngsters in London. It's like a British Gossip Girl kind of. The way Jessa Hastings writes these characters, like you really kind of hate them, but you do love them because the way she writes and the style and like the way she gets their voices is just so entertaining and so fun, and I love these books so much. I don't even know, like I talk about these books so much on the channel that like you probably get it by now, and so many other people talk about these books too. If you're not super excited about the idea of reading a character-driven book, I think these are a really good place to start because stuff happens in them. It's through the characters' struggles and motivations and growth that stuff happens. It gives you that escapism, but it also gives you like deep, kind of dark-rooted character issues, which I love and I live for. Next we have Marlena, which is a book I read in like 2017, I think. Maybe even 2016, but I think 2017. Everything about 15-year-old Kat's new town in rural Michigan is lonely and off-kilter until she meets her neighbor, her manic, beautiful, pill-popping Marlena. Kat, inexperienced and desperate for connection, is quickly lured into Marlena's orbit by little more than an arched eyebrow and a shake of white blonde hair. As the two girls turn the untamed landscape of their desolate small town into a kind of playground, Kat catalogs a litany of firsts: first drink, first cigarette, first kiss, while Marlena's habits harden and calcify. Within the year, Marlena is dead, drowned in 6 inches of icy water in the woods nearby. Now, decades later, when a ghost from that pivotal year surfaces unexpectedly, Kat must try to forgive herself and move on, even as the memory of Marlena keeps her tangled in the past. Alive with an urgent, unshakable tenderness, Julie Buntin's Marlena is an unforgettable look at the people who shape us beyond reason and the ways it might be possible to pull oneself back from the brink. This was just like a beautiful coming of age story, but also like, as you can see, like very dark and like twisted. And it's kind of just about this young woman, her relationship to this person who she thought was one thing that ended up being something else, and reckoning with that as she gets older. Really good, fun, easy book. Okay, next I have My Dark Vanessa. Just always check the content warnings and trigger warnings, but for this one especially. This is basically about this woman. It goes back and forth between 2 time periods. The first is when she was like 15 or 16 and had an affair with her like 40-something-year-old English teacher in boarding school. And then I believe in 2017, 2018 now, when she's like in her 30s, other women are coming forward and being like, I was abused by this man, and she kind of like has to make a choice whether or not she's going to come out with her own experiences of what happened. And it's just so beautifully written. I can't believe this is her first book, Kate Elizabeth Russell. Reading this book from Vanessa's perspective was so important, and Kate Elizabeth Russell really stuck true to her gut on this. She was given feedback that in order to make Vanessa likable, you needed to have the teacher's point of view. I'm really glad that she ignored that note, because I think that this is just such a truthful, accurate representation of like what went on in this woman's mind, this girl's mind when she was young, and now as well. I just really loved it. It's dark though. Next I have My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which I also gave away, but this book is basically about this young woman who I think her mom like died or something, and she basically decides she's going to spend the whole year, she's wealthy and doesn't have to work, she's going to spend the whole year like on the Upper East Side just on sleeping pills, like sleeping through basically the whole year. Yeah, it's set in New York City in 2000 and 2001 and follows an unnamed protagonist as she gradually escalates her use of prescription medications in an attempt to sleep for the entire year. So it's character driven. It's a study in depression, obviously. And I really love this author. She also wrote Eileen, which I didn't read. I didn't know it was a book, but I saw the movie, again with Anne Hathaway. Such a good movie, so unexpected, really intense. You know, a lot of character driven books, I think, deal with characters that are just really struggling. A lot of character-driven books I find have a lot of darkness to them, because if there's no plot, it's like there has to be something going on internally within the character that's so difficult, or thing that the character's really trying to get through. Otherwise, excuse me, you know, otherwise it's just, oh my god, shut up! I love reading about complex people that are just at war themselves. My year of rest and relaxation is definitely a lot like that. The next one I have that's character driven is Pineapple Street. This goes back and forth between 3 characters. It's definitely a character study of the wealth gap. It's about this woman who comes from a working class family, and she marries into this very, very, very wealthy family who lives in Park Slope. So her husband has 2 sisters and then parents and mom and dad, and they have moved out of this house, but it's like his childhood home. And so now it's just them that live there, like as a couple. And so that kind of creates some like weird dynamics between her and the other 2 sisters, or the other 2 perspectives that you read. So there's Georgina, who is kind of like works for a nonprofit, trying to figure out her life. And then I forget the other sister's name, but she's a mother of 2, I think. I really genuinely liked all 3 of the characters. All 3 of these characters have a pretty large arc. It just kind of follows these 3 women as they figure out kind of how to deal with each other and the family, I guess, and the dynamics kind of that the wealth gap has presented to and manifested in all 3 of these women individually and with each other. Next I have Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion. I don't really know how to explain this book. It's about this woman who I guess is like having a mental breakdown. It takes place in LA in the 60s or 70s, and like also the desert. Her relationship with all of these men and like her friends, and like this is just written in such a way that you just don't read books written like this anymore. You kind of like are just dropped into each chapter in like a new place, and you kind of have to like figure out where you are and what's going on. I mean, it's Joan Didion, obviously it's well written. This woman is just, she's losing it, but also is it her fault that she's losing it? Who knows? It's a very quick book. As you could see, there's like not a lot on each page. The chapters are really short. So if you're looking to read like an older character driven book, or just like a book that wasn't written in the past 5 years, that maybe has a different kind of writing style, a different voice, maybe a little bit more elevated, I would definitely start with this one. You kind of have to slow down when you're reading it a little bit. She doesn't spoon feed you like authors of today do, but I think it's easy enough and quick enough that if you're not used to reading books in this style, it's doable. Also a beautiful cover. All of these books have beautiful covers, I think. Next I have Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. This is my favorite Colleen Hoover book. It's also definitely a character that I want to play. It's about this woman, Kenna, who has been in prison for 5 years, and she is released, and she is trying to connect with her young daughter who is living with the father of her child's parents. And so it kind of opens when she gets out of prison, and you see her navigate that situation basically. I cried a lot when I read it. My favorite Colleen Hoover book, as I said, so I would definitely give her a read. Next I have The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I also gave away to a friend. I kind of wish I didn't, because it's one of my favorite books of all time and I wish I had it on my bookshelf. I guess I could buy it again. I'm not gonna buy a book that I've read though. I feel like that's a waste of money. It's about this young author, present day, who gets the opportunity to, I think, write this woman, Evelyn Hugo, who is like this now a lot older, like famous actress from kind of old Hollywood times. She gets the opportunity, I believe, to write her memoirs. People go back and forth between like her interviewing Evelyn, present day New York City, to Evelyn living in Hollywood in like the 40s and 50s and stuff, and she had 7 husbands. So you kind of go through and you meet all of them, and one of them, there's a spin-off in the book Malibu Rising, which is also great. There are plot points, but it really is more about Evelyn and her relationship to this one person. There's a nice twist at the end. It's so good. I love old Hollywood. I love that whole scene, and like books about that, and books about kind of like the dark side of that, the juxtaposition of like what sort of image was presented to the public and what was actually going on in private. Really, really good book. Highly recommend. The next book I have here is actually technically, I think, considered nonfiction, but it's not written like nonfiction. It's called The Women by Lisa Taddeo, and it goes back and forth between these 3 women. I think she changed the names of the actual women that this is about as she goes goes back and forth. Like, these are all real women that like these things happen to. Obviously 3 different women with very different kind of circumstances, totally unrelated to each other. So it goes back and forth, and like I was expecting at the end for them to like, for it to all get tied together. It doesn't. It just goes back and forth between those 3 stories. 3 character-driven stories in one book, basically. And then of course there is The Vanishing Half. It's about these twins. They're black, but they are white passing. So like they get separated. One of the women ends up kind of living a life pretending to be white, essentially. Like, I don't think her husband knows that she is a black woman. And then the other woman stays in the town that they were born in and lives life as a black woman. Kind of just chronicles both of those experiences. Oh, so what happens is, what will happen to the next generation when their own daughters' storylines intersect? So they're kind of estranged, but then somehow their daughters meet or intersect somehow. I don't exactly remember the details because I read it a while ago, but it was so good. So yeah, those are the character-driven books that I wanted to share with you. So I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you have any other character-driven novel recommendations. I obviously, if I haven't made it abundantly clear, eat that up, so please let me know. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.